Hey guys, hello and welcome to Naveed for Speed. Today I'm in the beautiful North York Moors and I'm here specifically to drive this Suzuki Jimny. Now you'll have noticed I've done quite a bit of work with Suzuki recently, and if you haven't already seen my Suzuki Swift Sport Hybrid video, make sure to click this pop-out banner up here. But today I'm here to drive this very special Suzuki Jimny, and that's because it comes with a bit of a twist. Twisted restore and reimagine traditional analogue vehicles like the Land Rover Defender. Their latest project focuses on enhancing the Suzuki Jimny, a car that has been likened to a mini version of the Mercedes G-Wagon. There are many upgrades on this Jimny, but does it improve the overall driving and ownership experience? So this particular Jimny is a 2022 model and it has been modified by a company called Twisted. Now Twisted are based up in Thirsk and predominantly modify Land Rover Defenders, but now they've turned their attention to this, the Suzuki Jimny, and they've added their own little special touch onto the car. And you can see some of those changes immediately as you look at the car, and I'll show you some of those changes on the exterior. So if we start on this front grille, now the front grille is body colored, so it makes it stand out from your ordinary Jimny. It makes this particular Jimny a little bit more special. As we move towards the sides of the car, you can see these wing mirrors, they're body colored as well, and they basically match the front grille and give that sort of full theme to the entire car. You'll also notice these huge chunky tyres that sit on these 16-inch alloy wheels. These alloy wheels are Twisted's own design and they sit on these BF Goodrich knobbly off-road tyres, and it gives the car a little bit more presence. The car's been raised by a couple of inches as well. As you move towards the side of the car, you can see the decals where it says Jimny by Twisted, and it has some mountains. It looks like mountains in the background. Now I suspect that those, I would like to think, are the North York Moors, because here we are. If it's not, then it's just a really cool coincidence. Notice the door handle is black still, a nice little contrast to the car. Of course it matches the stickers as well, and you've got loads of stickers around the car which basically promote Twisted. That's because this is the car that most journalists have been driving and have been testing, and you'll see this car more and more in the media. And at the back you've got a spare tire as well, and you might have noticed, or you may not have noticed, that this particular Jimny is the commercial version, so it's only a two-seater, but more of that when I show you on the inside. Let's check out the interior of the car. Right, so the changes aren't just on the exterior of the car, there's also loads of changes on the interior of the car. The first thing you'll notice is this leather upholstery all over the car, on the seats, on the steering wheel, on the gear stick as well. It's basically Twisted have added an aura of luxury to the car, but it's everywhere. You can see on the door cards, you can see on the dashboard, and generally, especially on the seats, it's very good quality. The stitching is amazing. On the dashboard you can see that the stitching is a little bit bent, so it does show that this is handmade, but it makes it a little bit more unique and it makes it that bit more bespoke. And of course you can specify your own Suzuki Jimny to however you want. Twisted have a load of options that you can do. You can even bring your own four-seater Jimny as well as buy this ready-made vehicle. You'll also notice this central infotainment system, which is touchscreen, so they've upgraded that as well, and it has Bluetooth for your phone as well, but it's generally, you're probably going to be using your phone more than you will be using this, but it's great to play your music on and know where you're going essentially. You can see the steering wheel has this sort of a really cool leather on it as well with this center marker. It's got Twisted logo embossed in the middle and contrasting stitching. But something which I'm really excited, not just excited, I really quite like, is this sort of the instrument cluster, which now has this soft touch material on the exterior rather than your normal scratchy plastic, and that gives it a bit more, again, a bit more of a luxurious theme, and it's really nice to touch. It also means that the instrument cluster is not going to get scratched as easily, but it kind of reminds me of Bell & Ross watches. It has a sort of similar look to it, with the round dial in a square surround, and I think that looks really cool. It gives it that rugged outdoor feel. The rest of the car is generally the same as the normal Jimny. Actually, I forgot to mention the Alcantara headlining as well. That looks really cool. The Suzuki Jimny is a cool car. Regardless of what you think of it, whether it's cute, it's so cool. It's kind of like an old Mini Cooper. They're just so cool, and that's the same thing with the Suzuki Jimny. It's small, it's quite tall, but it's got a really small wheelbase. It's easy to drive around the city and park, but it's just so characterful. And it's the same with this Twisted Jimny, but it's actually enhanced a little bit more because it's been given these upgrades. And when you get into the Jimny and you start driving it, immediately you will start to smile because it is so fun. The second that you start to put your foot down and you go over 3,000 revs, you start to hear that turbo. Oh yes, that is so addictive. It is so fun and characterful. Now I know what you're thinking, turbocharger. The normal Jimny doesn't have a turbocharger. Yes, you're correct. The normal Jimny is a 1.5 litre naturally aspirated engine which produces around 101 brake horsepower. But Twisted have added a turbocharger to this one, and they've upgraded the ECU. So now it produces over 160 brake horsepower. And the change in power is immediate. The 0 to 60 time is halved, and it basically means that now you have enough power to get out of your own way. Normally the ordinary Jimny would struggle on slip roads and on faster roads, whereas this Jimny, it can just fly. And you hear those turbos after 3,000 revs. Oh yes, anytime you get above 3,000 RPM, that turbo starts to take effect. You start hearing it, and when you lift off, you get that flutter, which is so cool. I've never heard a turbocharger this loud. In fact, if I put this window down over here, and all you're gonna hear is wind noise actually. Now that brings me on to my next point, the wind noise. This new Jimny is a lot more refined, this Twisted Jimny. You've got sound deadening, and it has made a big difference. Now, what I thought we would experience is no wind noise, which is what we're getting, but also no tire noise, lots of tire noise because of those knobbly tires. But in actual fact, on the road, on a dry day like this especially, it's perfectly fine. I'm not feeling any discomfort, and I'm not struggling for traction anywhere. Now, often with knobbly tires, you will have to sacrifice some of that grip because you don't get a bigger footprint, you don't get a larger contact surface with the road. But with these, on a dry day like this, it's perfectly fine. And it's got loads of power, but it's not going crazy and it's not trying to spin its wheels. It's still staying straight and staying true. Now, I mentioned comfort. We have to talk about the Eibach springs and the Bilstein dampers. Those have been upgraded, and it just makes this Jimny that's so much more comfortable, especially with all the power. You've got the comfort, but then you've got the handling, you've got the grip where you need it, especially around the corners. This new Jimny is flat. It corners flat, and the Jimny is, like I said, a tall car with a small wheelbase. It is very agile already because it can turn very quickly because of the small wheelbase, but now it just feels a lot more confident, and you can go into corners at greater speeds. Now, talking about corners, I have to mention the steering. Now the steering is an interesting one because it is actually, I found, rather slow. It's not, think of a sports steering wheel which is very sharp and any sudden movement will send the car going off to one side or the other. With this car, it's the total opposite end of the spectrum. Look at the amount of play that I have in the steering wheel. There's so much play, especially at the higher speeds. But when you're driving in the lower speeds, when you're maneuvering the car around the car park or just driving around a 30-mile-an-hour city road, for example, the steering wheel is perfectly fine and you don't notice that. It's only at the higher speed that I'm having to constantly adjust the steering wheel to stay within the lane that I'm in. But otherwise, this is such an enjoyable car. I'm having so much fun, especially when you hear that turbo noise. It just invokes something inside you, and that child inside you just gets so happy. And that's what the Jimny is like, because it is just like a little toy. It's so cool. Now, a lot of people liken this car to a baby G-Wagon, and it has off-road ability, it has towing capacity, and it looks pretty cool as well. But as far as the baby G-Wagon goes, Mercedes have recently just announced that they are going to make a baby G-Wagon. I think they're going to call it the Little G, and it's going to be fully electric, and it's basically going to compete with at a lower price point. So obviously the G-Wagon is a rather expensive car anyway, so Mercedes have decided to make almost a light version of the G-Wagon so that it can compete with the likes of the Land Rover Defender, for example. But even still, I think the price of that baby G is going to be so much more than this car, and of course it's going to have more refinement, and of course it's going to have this futuristic interior with the screens, etc. But this car is fully analog, it's traditional, it's rugged, and you can use it out in the sticks. You can use it for even for popping off to the shops, put your dog in the back, whatever. This car is good for that. But let's talk about that little G. Now, because it's going to be electric and it's going to be priced, I would say, more than this. Now, this particular Suzuki Jimny by Twisted costs £50,000 plus VAT. So if you're going to buy it privately, you're looking at around £60,000. But if you're going to buy it as part of a business, you're going to buy it at £50,000. Now, you might think that is a lot of money for a Suzuki Jimny. And of course, it is a lot of money for a Suzuki Jimny, considering the price of the standard Jimny. But what you're getting for that money is basically a car which is an off-roader. It is characterful, it is enjoyable, it has this sort of refined interior now, and it has performance upgrades. It has a better, it has turbocharger now, so it's got more power. And I don't think the towing capacity has changed. I don't think, I'm not sure about the torque, but it certainly feels a lot more confident, and you've just got a fun, enjoyable car. But when you look at it from the perspective of that baby G coming along, that little G, keep calling it baby G, I think it's called little G. When you look at that little G and the price that that's potentially going to be at, this car will seem like a bargain. And it's a throwback to the early days of the Jimny. The Jimny hasn't changed much since it first came about. And I think that's what Twisted are all about. Twisted take these cars that are rugged, that are analog, and they're just enhancing them. It's the same reason why Twisted haven't gone on to modify the new Defender. Now, I know they have considered it, and there are companies out there like the Chelsea Truck Company and Urban Automotive who have moved on to the new Defender, but Twisted have stuck to that old Defender, and that's their sort of I suppose their brand lifestyle. That's what they stand for, and they've got a really cool community built around that. A lot of Land Rover Defender owners love that old Defender, and they come together in a really cool community for events, etc. They do all kind of events, Twisted. But yeah, they've not moved on to the new Defender, and in the same way, that's why they've gone and done the Jimny. I do know that they are considering a few other things like Caterham. That's another interesting idea for them. But the possibilities are endless when it comes to this Jimny and what they can do. You can specify your Jimny to have whatever you want. You can get a roof rack, you can get a light bar, you can get whatever you want. If you speak to Twisted, they can get it for you. And of course, like I mentioned, you can get your own Suzuki Jimny upgraded with Twisted parts. But what is the future of Twisted? Where can they go with this? And I personally think, if I'm being very ambitious, because the Suzuki Jimny sits on a ladder frame chassis, could we potentially see a 6x6 Jimny one day? How crazy is that? I just think that the Jimny, with it being so popular, with it being so characterful, everybody loves the Jimny. Twisted have tapped into a market which is rather smart, I think, and I feel like it's going to be so fruitful for them. So I'm excited to see more and more of what we can get from this. But yeah, this is the Twisted Jimny, and it's just such a fun car. That's all I can tell you. Excuse me whilst I spend the rest of the day doing this. The Twisted Jimny is such a fun car to drive. You often find yourself using just two throttle positions, fully on or fully off. The blow-off valve on the turbocharger means that the satisfaction is through the roof. Average fuel economy was 33 miles per gallon, and that's even after everyone before me has pushed this car to its limits. The Twisted Jimny, despite it being expensive, is a desirable car that I won't forget in a long, long time.